Hello, everyone. We hope this finds you having a wonderful Friday. I'm Lauren Bissett with the National Association of Manufacturers and the Manufacturing Leadership Council, and I am quite delighted to welcome you to our masterclass series, Tech Talk today, adopting a people-centric approach to digital transformation. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. We have muted all of our lines to maintain the sound quality the best we can during the session, but please feel free to use the chat, make comments, ask questions, and you can either put questions in privately to one of us or to the group itself. We will do our best to address all of your questions, and if you so choose, we will provide the opportunity for you to unmute and ask your questions at the end of the session. So that's it for housekeeping. So please welcome our host and moderator, Mr. Jeff Puma, the Content Director of the Manufacturing Leadership Council. Jeff, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Lauren, and welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be your moderator on this topic. It's exceptionally important. And when you think about it, a lot has been written about people-centric leadership. There's Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, Bob Chapman's Everybody Matters, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, to name just a few. But today we'll be focusing that people-centric spotlight on digital transformation, how processes are optimized, technology is deployed, and projects are implemented, all with end users, stakeholders, and other people in mind. To talk us through this important topic, I'm excited to be joined by Jay Monahan, NTT Data's Managing Director, Manufacturing Consulting. For more than 20 years, he's been creating technology solutions to improve lives and business operations. Please welcome Jay Monahan. There, Jay.
Oh no, technical difficulties. I didn't hit the mute. Thanks, I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
No problem.
Good thing we got those technical difficulties out of the way.
Yeah, good thing I don't work for a tech firm at all.
So before we dive into our discussion, I just want to remind all of our attendees to add questions into the chat at any time. We will do our best to get to those by the end of our discussion today. So our focus is people-centric approach on digital transformation. And so let's dive into a couple questions here. What are the top hurdles within digital transformation for end users?
I'd break them into a couple different buckets. First is the business benefits, coming back to end users to really understand why you're doing the change. Sometimes they can get stuck in a position of being very complacent. They're satisfied with what it is. Think of the change curve. They know where they are, but hey, why are we going there? They may not see the macro level, but that's been around for a while. But I think another component that's a top hurdle is the new technologies from an end user perspective. Why are we shifting? I was on a project where we were trying to update some legacy applications, and one of them was from 1987. So if you think about it, where were you in 1987? The expertise for that particular project was a couple of programmers that were keeping that system alive. And now you're trying to go integrate with it. So not only do you have to think about how do you tie back to the old technology or how do you migrate from it, but now what are the concepts of putting something to the new platforms and taking on-premise technology and putting to the cloud. Another big component, and I'll dive into a little bit maybe later based on where we are, is the methodologies have changed from where you look at something from a waterfall to an agile approach. That shift on resources and skills, how people are used to doing that is a big impact. And I think the last one is really just the pace. Nobody wants a project that's 12 to 18 months, Jeff. They want something that's small windows. They want to rapidly deploy. And we have to think about that pace of change, not just from the business benefits that we want to get, but really, how do we balance it out with the end users? You got key stakeholders that really want to participate, but sometimes they get the two jobs at once. I'm on the full-time job, and then they come back and they're trying to do it. So you got to try to factor in that burnout.
Right. That's a great point. And we've been hearing a lot about burnout in all areas of people's careers recently. So I'm glad that you brought that up here. So how are organizations incorporating a people-centric approach to technology deployment and process improvement?
I think a couple things that make a big difference is really the stakeholders and having them own it from the top down. And when you look at it, it's not just stakeholders carrying that baton to say, this is what we should do, but they really have to embrace the end users and put themselves in that position. It's taking a look on a hands-on is what is that person really doing in a daily job, and looking at what that impact is going to be. So when you change that business process and you put that technology layer on top to support it, how does that really affect the end users with their daily job? Another component, if you're looking at that people-centric approach, is what I mentioned prior, that burnout factor, is that proper resource allocation. Take into account that if you're going to do a rapid deployment and you want to get that business benefit, you really have to make sure, either internally or externally, you're backing them up. You're making sure accommodate for it. Not just in the beginning of the project when you think that's the perfect plan, but for all those little interruptions that happen. I would also encourage, key stakeholders in the organization, empower those end users. You have a significant opportunity to gain insights from somebody that's been doing that job and help them make decisions, and let them. Give them the coaching, put them in that position. You might have a leader that you did not even, think about, that now you put them on the project and they're architecting it, and all the things that they were wanting to go do for years, they finally have that opportunity. That passion is addictive. And the last one is really measuring for success. We can say that on every one of the projects, and success isn't just, hey, I came in on budget or I delivered A, B, and C, but it's really looking to make sure that you got the adoption and you're getting those results. And if you're not, you may have to, adjust course, but do that. One example would be, there's a shop floor transformation project I have in manufacturing, and it's 40 plus plants. And one of the things that we're planning out is a key stakeholder involvement is to make sure that they don't discount OCM, the people factor up front. And it's not just a technology deployment. But when you go out to 40 different plants, think about 40 different organizations and 40 times 3 shifts that you have of people that you have to impact. So Jeff, on that piece, how do you measure it up front? How do you continue that change? At the end of the day, how do you get a PMO structure in place that's going to take that feedback and you make it not just a technology deployment?
Excellent. So agile-led initiatives versus traditional waterfall methodologies. You talked a little bit about this earlier, but let's talk a little bit more about it. Which is more prevalent during a digital transformation project? How is this approach impacting end users, business stakeholders, and leadership?
A good question. From my background, I've been doing this for 25 plus years. And we started off, it was, you're doing the traditional waterfall. You do the prep on the project, you write your functional spec, your technical spec, and you're writing all this stuff, but you're not coding anything. You do the standard, system integration test, user acceptance test. You have the coders do the unit test before that, and you roll it out with training, and you're doing this, and this. Great. You write everything up and you get that whole big picture of all the different components, and you've mapped it out. You have a master plan of everything built. It's great from an end user perspective because they can see everything that they want. But from a timing perspective, all the nuances, you're trying to spell everything out. You eat a lot of budget that comes back up. So that waterfall, I've seen it turned into like a hybrid with agile, or sometimes you're just going full agile. But that mindset, when you take some of the safety checks that the users are used to in an organization that's used to detailed functional specs, and they're looking for, hey, you code, I gave you all the requirements, you come back 6 weeks later and it's done. It's a different mindset when you come back and you look at how you do an agile project. So for example, on waterfall, you have a project manager, you got your lead development lead, but now you have an introduction of a scrum master. How do you handle that? What's the components that you want to go cover? And not all scrum masters are the same as a project manager. You got to balance that out. Looking at sprints is another big component. You could say that I'm going to do a operator dashboard for a shop floor, and that's going to go take me 4+ weeks to go build out. And maybe you do some user reviews. But if you're doing a sprint with agile, you may have, this is our goal for part of it this week, and you're showing it to the user. You're doing that continual feedback. It's great for the end users, but they got to realize that they're not going to get everything at once. The biggest thing that I found in agile that is a mind shift is making sure that you can balance that active user participation. getting their feedback and making sure they have time to, as you're doing the different sprints and that you do the end user reviews, that they have time to give you that feedback and they could see it grow. They can't go away for 2 weeks and you come back. It's almost every day. And I think the one challenge with Agile is making sure you see the big picture with all the different things, because you're building incrementally. You're not coming back and you come back 3 weeks later, you have a house getting built and, oh, by the way, everything's done. You're going to come up every day and see, hey, they got the foundation, they built part of the roof. Hey, we're picking the curtains, we're moving in furniture. They're going to see that process and they get to help adjust and do course corrections. The biggest thing is really just active ownership from the business and giving them a time to absorb how you do that. How do you do your sprints? How do you measure the user stories and epics, and making sure that you get them comfortable with it. The best thing about it is you get something, a rapid product, you can get that back out and you can course correct, but it is difficult for organizations that aren't used to it. So I think for successful digital technology changes now, you're going to have a lot more agile projects and need to make sure that you prep that customer up in that organization to adopt to it.
So you mentioned active ownership, and earlier you talked about empowering end users. I think those are really powerful ideas. Can you unpack empowering end users a little bit? And have you seen any like really stellar ways to do that empowering?
I think the biggest thing that you can go do on the project is twofold. If you happen to be, you're part of that organization, is you give that person enough guidance to make those decisions without every day feeling that they got to feel micromanaged. So giving them that level of trust, letting them on instances make mistakes. It's going to happen, but they do the course correction. And if you're one of those providers on the outside, like, from our side, it's NTT, we come back in, is you're giving them that tool and that feedback, and you're encouraging them as well. Because at the end of the day, we can be very smart for what we do from a business perspective. We can come with all these ideas, but it really rests at the end of the day on the users and those key stakeholders. So what I've seen successful is on both sides, giving that person positive encouragement. And then when they're making those wins, broadcast it at the top of your lungs and let them know that they did it. Hey, you found a way to go solve these tough problems and you're pushing it out. Because the best credit that you could ever do on these projects is making sure that you've achieved that success and you recognize those key stakeholders, that subject matter user, that, hey, I figured out how to solve that problem for you. Get them passionate about it. And then it kind of spreads out on the rest of the project. That makes it fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's contagious.
Yes.
Yeah. In a good way. So,
yes.
Yeah. So, what are some best practices for people-centric digital transformation approach that you've seen?
It's a simple way of thinking, but I think it's best that you go in and you're humble. You learn from the business. Early in my career, when I first came out of college and I'm on my first project, it's a steel company. And the individual that came in, he had 40 plus years. Steel company, black coffee, very terse with what's there. He's looking at me and he's just like, I don't know about you. You don't know much about steel. By the time of the end of the project, he showed me all the different characteristics, the 400 plus different characteristics of how you're going to go do an order entry system when you're making steel, the different processes that you do from rolling, how they're pouring it. But you have to be humble enough to say that you don't know, and you learn from the business from what's there. I could talk about technology all day, but the unique ways that they have to do that product was something that you need to pick up, and all the nuances and workarounds they have to do their job to get that end product out. So I think the biggest thing is really making sure that you're humble enough to listen. And with that, when you look at somebody's roles and responsibilities, I think, like for most people on the call, you're not going to be somebody that your job description defines you. There's 1,000 other things, Jeff, that you do in your job that aren't listed when you start it. So if you think about that from somebody in operations or somebody in maintenance or somebody in production planning or in that manufacturing spectrum, try to pick up the other things that they do. And with that, it goes back to soliciting the feedback throughout the process. through the entire life cycle. Constantly take a barometer of how you're doing and how they're interpreting the change for what's there. Why are we changing the screen? Why are we doing a different metric? Get their buy-in. They may not initially agree with it, and that's fine, but take the time to listen more and talk less. I had that from one of my new hires that I work with. She's out of college, and it was a good reminder to pause. You got a lot of great ideas, and when you go into some significant change in an organization and you're going to put an entirely new system in, or you're going to put AI in, and they don't understand the concept of how it's going to impact them, listen, figure out what that cause is, and maybe you can make a big difference with them just by trying to understand why they're acting the way that they are, and then you could put that back into the project and hopefully address those concerns.
It sounds like curiosity also plays a big role there in what you're saying. You know, the active listening and going out and trying to find out what's happening in different people's lives and in different people's little pockets of a project. Would you say that's?
I'd agree with that. And what I would say is some of the best ideas that we've had on projects, they're coming from that user that never said anything, but they never knew how to do it. So I've been on a project that was an order to cash, and there's a lot of things that I found out from how they had to go process orders and get things pushed out that they had a lot of workarounds, but they only had a certain set of tools. And they figured out how to do it, but they were always thinking about 5 to 6 different ways. So when you walk into a project and you say, I can help them, the more you listen, you'll find out that they probably have some of the best ideas to solve the problems with the customer that you may not have thought of. Then your job is not just listening to them, but it's coming back and saying, oh, by the way, did you know that platform covers 6 out of the 10 that you want? The other 2 are already there. And once again, you go back to that excitement. They're getting buy-in because you're helping solve their problems and it's coming out right away. So that learning curve is sometimes it's on both sides. We can be great technology providers, but it's really at the end of the day, getting that adoption and inspiring your team that, hey, you're going to go make that difference with them, not at them. Right. But it's that buy-in. You got to be humble enough.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You know, you hear a lot about going to the Gemba and seeing where where the work is done and talking to those people who are actually doing it. And that's exactly what you're saying there. And I think that's, you know, you can't just sit in sort of an ivory tower or in an office and push everything out.
No. I mean, we've had some difficulties, I think, over the last 3 years with travel. We could say that. Mm-hmm. The best thing for me has always been if you get to walk and do a gantry walk at a plant, you're putting on your boots, you're making sure your hard hat, stay in between the 2 yellow lines so the forklift guy doesn't, you know, politely bump you. Yep. You know, you're safety conscious, but you see how they do it. I've had one customer, and trying to fathom in my head how this gentleman did this. He's running 3 CNC machines at the same time. He programs it, comes back up, he comes back, and then this one goes off with alert. He sets it up, it's in setup mode. This one's running, this one has a downtime, and he's constantly going around. If you understand that operation, you realize why he doesn't want to go put in any data into a terminal at all. He's too busy. You change your way of doing things and how you interact with that person. And maybe that's a piece that you automate as much as you can. And then you give them feedback on, here's the things we really need that we can't capture. But you got to put yourself in the shoes of that person doing that job.
Yeah. Very, very good insight. So I have a couple questions that have come in directly to me through the chat. I'd encourage anyone else to add in questions as we kind of get into a little bit of the Q&A here element of this. So the first one that came in, as the manufacturing workforce ages, how should organizations balance pending retirees versus new hires?
Good question. I believe it's a balance between both. If you take pending retirees, they have tremendous tribal knowledge, and they've been able to keep operations up and running through, you know, very good times and very bad times. And they found a way to work with what they have. Sometimes I get the privilege of going into companies that they've been minimal investment for so long, and they finally get a chance for a project, and you're trying to go cover it. And what you find is you really want to leverage that workforce before they go, because a lot of the things that they do, it's not written down in SOGs. It's not written into job guidelines. So embracing them, understanding what it is, the tricks of the trade, those unwritten rules, and you take that feedback. But on the other hand, you have new generations coming back forward, and they don't want to look at an AS400 screen that's monochrome. They don't want to go deal with this. They're looking at you, pick up your phone, I come back, I can run my app, I'm good to go, I'm done. You take that passion for technology and the things that they can solve, and I really believe that you got to bridge the gap by putting those two people together to pass on the torch. So if you think of that generation that's retiring and the new generation that's coming back in, they're the stewards of that shop. They can help improve those processes and come back. But the fundamentals on how you do certain components, some industry, it's not going to change. There's a certain way that you're going to go make pasta. There's certain ways that you're going to go turn steel. There's certain ways that you're going to make titanium and do, assembly. But you can always find room for improvement. But the balance is taking the best out of that retiree workforce that you can to retain that knowledge, but instill that passion in the new workforce for what's there and embrace some of that technology.
It's funny. I had a boss one time who asked me what my biggest concern was, and I was like, that I'm going to get hit by a bus. And she was like, that doesn't have to do with work. I was like, no, but like all the knowledge of what I do rested with me. And so the solution to that was creating standard work and a knowledge hub that people could tap into and understand what I was doing. And I think a little bit of what you're talking about is kind of that knowledge transfer and standard work and how people share what they know. And that's becoming increasingly important right now as turnover happens and as the workforce is aging out and new voices are coming in with new ideas. I'll get to a question in a second, but the interesting thing that I've always thought about standard work that's fascinating to me is that it's not standardized. It continues to evolve. As new ideas come in, as you tap into those workers who are doing the work and know the situation intimately, or have a new perspective on things. And I'm curious, just by way of follow-up, have you seen good ways to transfer knowledge, in your experience as you've been dealing with these things?
A couple of the standard stuff is, documenting, that's one thing, putting on a SharePoint, that's another, but I found the best is really that interactive between the parts and that hands-on. That's probably one of the best reasons why I love manufacturing. You're making stuff, and then you get a chance to be able to see how it's made and then get that passion for it. But when you're passing it on, it's also good to, balance that new generation coming in to challenge. Here's a different thing you can, and you're getting that debate. Is it really going to be feasible if we do these things? Can it work? Not that, one side's going to say no and yes. It's just, can you balance it? Because they may know some factors that you didn't. That's the best way that I've seen, if you can get that mix of resources on projects, because not only did you pass it on, but it's practical knowledge. And then you're going to instill that into the next workforce.
Excellent. So the next question that came in direct to me, from experience, projects often deprioritize the value of training, communication activities, and project budgets. How do you justify the people investment when funds are tight?
We're going to talk about the money. It's the risk at the end of the day. I'll give you an example. I had a project where we're doing the work up front, where it's another shop floor initiative, and we have the baseline. We want to come back and we get it out to the first facility, but based on certain things, we didn't do the rest of the training and facilities for the other organizations. Well, you went to the other organizations and it was more of a technology team as opposed to training and business users to understand what their challenges were. They stopped the rollout. So think about that for a second. You're trying to get that change and you made the business case and this is what we're going to go do. But at the end of the day, your linchpin winds up being the end users going, I can't use this for A, B, and C reason. And some of them may be valid and some of them may be not. But if you magnify that to a 40+ plant rollout, those business benefits and things you're looking to go achieve still at the end of the day resides on the end users. Your people by default are your most important asset. You may make steel, you may make excavators, you may work in a semiconductor manufacturing facility, but at the end of the day, your resources, your people, and regardless of the level, need to buy into it. And if they don't, for whatever reason, then you got to figure a way to do the course correction. And maybe they're very valid judgments, but you got to get that buy-in and make sure that you do it, because those big projects can stop in the middle of, and you need to try to get that tie. There is a question over to the side from Mark.
Yeah. So it's how well does Agile work when you are making changes to multiple plants at the same time? I assume they are not advancing at the same state.
Good question. The way that I've seen it broken up best is you could have 2 sets of development teams, and you need a couple different tiered environments for what you want to go do so you can mitigate the changes. Hopefully, when you're doing the base plant rollout, it's consistent. Here's our standardized template. You do the upfront assessment for that facility, and then you come back with the fit gap. So say 10 out of the requirements that you have, 2 are going to be the variations, then associate them with the timeline and properly schedule it. But that also balances, to your point, as you're doing that scrums and you're putting in new sprints and that new functionality, making sure you have a consistent balance, because it can easily, by default, that many moving parts, it can get pretty complex pretty quick. So it really takes not just a scrum master to balance that with the teams. It takes a project manager and your rollout manager to be in sync with what's needed for the organization. So it is a balancing act, but what I have seen successful is making sure those parties are interacting so you can get that clear communication.
Mark, does that answer your question? And feel free to come off mute if you have a follow-up.
We got a guess. So yes. Thank you, Mark.
Okay,
I appreciate
excellent. It. All right. Again, anyone else who has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, here's one that just came in direct to me again. From a project perspective, who is responsible for leading a people-centric approach to digital transformation?
In short, everybody. You don't need to be part of within my organization, it's workforce readiness, or you use the term organizational change management. It's everybody on the team, from the leader that's the project leader, the executive sponsor, all the way down to somebody that may be looking to do the programming or your DBA. Now, granted, your interactions at the end of the day are going to, vary. You typically don't have your programmer, holistically side by side with an end user. There may be a buffer with a BA or something in between. But at the end of the day, it's by that person taking that time to go listen, get that perspective. I've had the privilege to work with exceptionally talented individuals. They can build anything. I had one colleague, he just for fun, he was telling me how hot his coffee was with a sensor that he quickly plugged into the web just for fun. He's a mad scientist. But at the end of the day, that passion for technology, you have to balance it with how is it going to be used. And every interaction that you have with end users, and to understand their problems and to try to go address it, is a responsibility of every team member. And you could take some of the best lessons learned from, OCM resources, how they engage and how they listen, to even change projects around that have maybe been shifted to technology focused, and they haven't really addressed the business concerns. Because sometimes what you say isn't what people hear. And in that organization, what I've worked with workforce readiness or OCM individuals, they make sure that they reset your brain a little bit to focus on the people, even though the technology, we can build anything, but at the end of the day, the linchpin is always that end user. You got to figure a way to get their buy-in. And if you do it right, you really have a chance to transform companies.
That's a great spot to end. So I'm glad that question came in. So we're about out of time here. And so I'd like to thank you, Jay, for helping us navigate this important topic. Thanks also to everyone who participated in this Tech Talk. And in the chat, you should see a link any moment now from the NTT Data team to some great resources and content relevant to our discussion today. And please feel free to share that. There it is. Perfect, Lauren, thank you. And you'll be receiving a follow-up email on Monday with a link to the recording and any other materials like this link that just came in here. And additionally, a copy of this will be posted next week on our website for on-demand viewing. That's manufacturingleadershipcouncil.com. And if you have any questions to follow up, you can email those to mlcinfo@nam.org. So thank you, Jay. Thanks to our partners at NTT Data. Your entire team is wonderful over there, and it's a pleasure to work with you all. This has been a great conversation, and have a great weekend, and looking forward to more discussions like this to come.
All right. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good weekend. Appreciate it. Thank you.